like an enthusiastic crowd. So thank you for attending the session. So I have to admit, I'm going to start with a confession. And the confession is I actually have two titles for this presentation. I kind of tricked you. So Introduction to the Alfresco Implementation Methodology, but I want to come at it from the perspective of what thousands of years ago started as the 7 deadly sins. So I want to talk about the 7 deadly sins of running an ECM project from our perspective, and then we'll talk about the approach that we take within Alfresco Services to prevent those 7 deadly sins. And to keep this lively, and because we are in the heart of wine country, California, I have a bottle of 7 Deadly Zins, with a Z, to give away to the either example as I go through of your perspective, an example that reinforces one of the 7 deadly sins that I talk about, or the most enlightening question for the audience. So we'll vote at the end. All right? So quick introductions. My name's Steve Davito. I have the responsibility for Alfresco's global consulting organization. I've been with the company about a year. Joined November of last year, just in time for the Boston Summit. I love the company. I'm super excited to be here. I have about 20 years of experience in complex systems implementation, professional services within software companies, worked for Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, Remedy Corporation, BMC Software. Most of my career have been in the services business. So I want to start with a sobering fact. And it's a sobering fact for all of us that are in the world of IT. 50% of IT projects fail outright, and another 50% fail to deliver on the business benefit. So that's fundamentally what we're all about. And again, I want to take it from the perspective of the 7 deadly sins of ECM projects. So let's get into it. Stop me as we go. Any questions or comments, raise your hand. You got a bottle of wine you can win at the end. So sin number 1, not having a plan. So whether you're a bridge developer or a construction project manager, that is a bad day. But you know what? That didn't happen overnight. That happened in a series of missteps that led to a complete misalignment. Think business expectations, the solution delivered, whatever parallel you want to draw. It's critical that you build a plan. Gartner had a content and collaboration summit just earlier this month, actually. And Kenneth Chin from Gartner commented, many companies are investing in collaboration and content software without any clue of how they are going to use it or if their users will even use it. The key is planning, right? So the industry analysts are saying it, the vendors are saying it, customers say they need it. I go into probably half of the customers that we walk into don't have a robust enough plan. And frankly, it is the number one reason companies fail to get the value or to get the project off the ground. So making a plan isn't that hard. It starts with understanding where you are, where you want to go. You'd never travel somewhere without a map and an understanding of where your destination is. So at a high level, where am I right now and where do I want to go? Involving the right people, and the right people is not just the IT team that's going to deliver the functionality for the business, it's also the users. And so what we see effective companies doing is establishing a steering committee, if you will. And that steering committee meets regularly, and they talk about the functional requirements, the non-functional requirements, the risks and issues. How's it going with user adoption and user enablement? We'll talk about change here in a little bit. But those companies that get really serious about including the right people have a huge head start. Defining phases and sprints for incremental value. So it's not big bang. It's not replace 17 different systems of record that you have in place today and go right to one Alfresco. Line up around incremental business value in phases and in small increments, right? We see that as a good and best practice that successful companies are using. Understanding and assigning the work. One of the biggest things I see is you walk in and a project manager may have been assigned and has no experience with ECM. That's okay. We'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of the people aspect. But when that happens, the tendency of the project manager is to grab the architect or the principal lead, technical lead on the project and drag them into every project planning conversation. Now the architect and principal lead doesn't have time to go do the work that they need to do to get the project off the ground. So we spend all our time telling the project manager how to build the plan, but nobody can execute the plan, right? So making sure that you understand the work, and if you don't understand that work, seeking help, and then obviously you assign the work. Building consensus, and building consensus, we'll talk in a minute about the business benefits and alignment there, but it's critical everybody's on board with the plan, and then you manage to that plan in a very disciplined way. It's okay, plans change, things happen, things take longer or shorter. You adjust the plans based on risks and dependencies. But it's really critical that you not only have a plan that you can show stakeholders, here's what we're marching to, but that you can show a cadence of how you're tracking against that plan. All logical stuff, right? There's nothing rocket science about this. Sin number 2, trying to figure things out as you go by reading the manual. Here's what I have to say that. You don't find the answer to business value by reading a manual. So this pie chart here, sorry for those in the back, but in 2008, Sandhill and NeoChange did a study, pretty exhaustive study, 300 plus enterprise companies, and they surveyed them across the range of questions related to enterprise software success. 70% of those polled said effective user adoption is the most important factor for realizing value with enterprise software. 13% said process alignment is the most important factor. 16% said organizational change. And guess what? 1% said the most important factor for realizing value was software functionality. Software functionality you get from reading the manual, right? Here's how you flip the bits that turn things on. In our world, 99% of the value comes from other things. So I'll let you read the comic, but I want to, this is to some extent a plug for the ecosystem. Alfresco and the ecosystem of partners have lots of experts with years of experience in ECM and with Alfresco. The point is, you don't have to hire us, but especially in the context of, and I get the fact a lot of enterprises have stretch assignments. They'll take a project manager that's new to a discipline and put them in. They may take somebody that's never managed a project and assign them to an ECM project. You may have an architect assigned who was involved in your SAP ERP type system, and they're doing ECM for the first time. In that case, understand it, call it out for what it is, and seek help. And you can feather in that expertise across a project plan. You don't have to, back up a truck and unload it with hundreds of consultants that are going to live on your site. That's not the point. Get the advice where you need, whether it's in building the plan, reviewing your requirements and aligning that to a base software package, building an effective design. Figure out where you need that help and leverage the experts. Sin number 3, not lining up project scope and objectives with the expected business outcome. 90% of the clients that we usually get involved with can't explain what is the business value they want out of the system in any kind of detail. And when you can't do that, you certainly can't line up the project scope with that business outcome. So talk about value. I'm a car guy. 1962 Chevrolet Corvette. Ooh, what a beautiful car. I'd love to have that car, but you know what? That car is a want for me. It's not a need. I've got a family of 5. I could spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on that shiny car and I can never use it because I can't get my family around, right? Guess what? I just did my own little business value analysis, right? It's a need. Yes, I'd love to have it. if money were no object, but we don't live in that world, in the implementation of systems. And so we do this every day in our personal life in deciding choices about whether to go get that classic car, but we don't do it enough in our systems development methodology. So target business value, first point. It's not have pain buy software and everything's fixed. First is, before you even talk about solutions, get all the issues out. Develop evidence and impact. Ask yourself, what evidence do we have that this is a real problem and who is impacted? Explore context and constraint. There's lots of ways to solve problems. What are the constraints we have to deal with in solving those problems? It could be organizational. It could be systems of record. It could be content related. It could be regulatory compliance requirements. Those are all constraints that you want to align those business pains around. Then drive your scope and objectives around that business case, right? Once you know those things, all the issues are out, evidence, impact, the quantification of how big those issues are. Now you have a light business case. Now you tailor your development sprints, your design towards delivering incremental value along that path. And one thing I see constantly is not measuring over time. Not coming back and saying 6 months after go live, 12 months after go live, 18 months after go live, where are we relative to the metrics we expected to move? Sin number 4, failure to ensure traceability through requirements, design, development, and testing. This is a big one. So traceability in my world brings order to chaos. So traceability to me is simply the ability to map a requirement through the process of an implementation, right? And there's different kinds of traceability. One is backward traceability. Backward traceability is all around, can you trace that requirement back to the business benefit that's expected? And we have some tools that we use specifically around business alignment, okay? Forward traceability is, can you track a requirement through to the design that fulfills that requirement, through to the development, construction objects, code, scripts, configuration, etc., through to test cases. If you don't do this, I promise you one of these days somebody will come up and say, great, love the work you guys have been doing. I know you're all working hard, but we forgot to tell you that we really need this requirement. Or, why'd you do it this way? That's not what we needed, right? So traceability gives you the ability to come back and say, remember these requirements we worked with the users for 2 weeks to define and get agreement and consensus on? And here's a design that supports those requirements. This is now in the change management realm, right? Is there a question in the back? No? Okay. There are tools out there. We use a traceability matrix that essentially just flags a requirement, flags the area of the design element. But come up with, it could be a spreadsheet, but come up with a traceability matrix.
Okay, I have a story.
All right, we got a story.
So I'm from Canada, and the provincial government there put in a provincial system for education.
I'm going to ask that you, if I can turn this thing on somewhere. There it is. There you go.
Okay, so I'm from Canada. The provincial government put in an education system across the province that we all have to feed data to. And one of the data elements is the 4 digits on a birth certificate. And this has just been causing chaos for everybody because we can't find the birth certificate, or if we can find it, there's 3 different numbers we could get those last 4 digits from. So finally I tracked down the business manager in charge of this, and I said, why are you collecting these 4 numbers? And they said, oh, the auditors wanted it. So I know the auditors. I went to the auditors. I said, why are you collecting these 4 numbers? They said, we never asked for that. So nobody knows why they're doing it, but it's causing hours and hours and hours of work.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So I have another story. So I did a consulting engagement. Thank you for that. I did a consulting engagement actually for a software company. This was in a past life, not Alfresco related, but we were, it was call center systems, right? So we're talking about pretty high volume stuff, handling support calls. And they had a series of queues and dashboards that they were going to manage, what's coming in and who picks what out of the queue and works those things. And they had about 7 or 8 different attributes that they wanted to signal, agent on site, customer at risk, critical situation, right? They had all these different, and for good reason, but flags that triggered awareness in the minds of the support agent. And as we were going through user study with a configured system with the customer, they said, this is great, you've given us everything we want, but it's too busy. Can we maybe have a flag that gets set when any of the other flags are set? And I said, oh, so wait, you want a flag? And he goes, well, when you put it that way, no, I don't, right? So it's always bringing it back to, we solved the problem, but that's, so again, thank you for the story. All right, sin number 5, not implementing a continuous improvement process. So this one's a big one for me. I was a process consultant at Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, did a lot of organizational change management work. I call this the one and done syndrome. The tendency is we're all busy, and in IT we've got 50 different projects going on at once. We've got competing demands. Management wants us to get right into the next project, right? I don't care how good your plan was, how good you were at configuring the system, how good you were at testing the system. There will be something when you flip that switch and start supporting users that will need to be improved. They'll realize that what they asked for in requirements isn't quite right, we need to change it. They'll realize that performance in this particular site over the wide area network isn't quite where it needs to be. There will be tuning on some dimension that needs to happen. And guess what? A lot of times what customers say they need 6 months after go live, they don't need that anymore. They need something completely different. So plan for a continuous improvement cycle. And I know that management will say, but how much is this all going to cost me, right? My point is the most successful organizations treat success as a journey, not a destination, right? This is just another graphic, that same study from Sandhill, definition of enterprise software success. 2008, 94% of people said business benefits realized, 75% in 2009. It's just a multi-year kind of study. But software is deployed and installed was only 46%. Right? Implementation project was on time and budget, less than 50%. That's not how we measure success. We measure success based on business outcome, and business changes. Change is constant. So business benefits when you flip the switch and go to a new system and everybody's doing something a little different. It might be process related, it might be tooling, it might be both. You may actually have a dip in productivity initially. The initial month after go live, you typically have users that are, learning their way around the new system, right? That's natural. So don't plan for and expect immediate benefits and then redirect all the resources to go attack the next project. Make sure you instrument some way of capturing that user feedback, staying highly responsive to those users, and then allowing yourself to change. Sin number 6, not preparing for change. I love this picture. So this is what a lot of organizations face when they're implementing ECM. It's not easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't need huge software implementations and consultancies and entire industry groups built around this, right? ECM is a business strategy supported by technology, and something is going to change. A lot of cases, Alfresco customers use Alfresco repository and they have their overall systems on top. It's a headless repository, right? So they write APIs to Alfresco. Many of you in the room may do this, right? We have one insurance company. It's integrated to Alfresco. The underwriting and claims applications that the users have used for years and years and years are what they interact with every single day. Alfresco is the repository. That's okay, and there may be minimal change to the end users, but there may be significant change to the IT organization because now they have different integrations and different infrastructure to support. So somewhere in the midst of your project is change. Understand what that is. And a technique that we've come up with is pretty simple, 2x2 grid, and it's called a change impact grid. And on this axis, you're looking at process change from low to high. On this axis, you're looking at tool change. And again, going back, if you've effectively gathered your requirements, you have them identified and traced to design, now you can start to categorize each of the requirements in terms of the change impact grid. Low tool change, low process change, we don't see a lot of change readiness activities in those projects. A lot of times you just give a quick how-to guide and set it on the user's desk for the day that they start using the new system. But if you have high tool change, low process change, you got to get the users in front of the system and go through some user acceptance processes and some feedback before implementation, and then you might need to have some subject matter experts that have really sat through, understand the new tool and how it works extraordinarily well, and those people are lined up with the different groups that are now on Alfresco. The real challenging ones, obviously high process change, high tool change, but I would encourage you to think about change because, and this dimension is not just the end user. Again, it may be completely transparent to the end user that they're even in Alfresco, which is fine. But there's many dimensions to this, and I would encourage you to lay out your requirements against a change impact grid like this. Sin number 7, not celebrating success. How many times, I'll say it this way, the most demoralizing thing for an IT project team is to go live with a new system and it has very few hiccups. And they might get a pat on the back from the manager that's been there in the trenches with them getting the system up, but there's no recognition from the business about, hey, we just consolidated 17 different systems and we now have a better way of working. And take the time to recognize those people that spent all that effort to get the system up and running. And what's that? The bottle of wine is that's very good. Some of the best project go-live events are wrapped around a bottle of wine, I think. But the other thing about celebrating success, which I think can help each of you in your next phase, whether it's with Alfresco or your next projects, having success in a project builds credibility. But that credibility, in my experience, doesn't come from saying, hey, we went live. It's being able to go back and say, here's the value. So again, if you've lined up the project scope and objectives to business value, now you can actually say the savings or the revenue gain or the customer satisfaction index that improved, et cetera, those metrics that you can showcase. And what I've seen time and time again is that a lot of procurement and executive management in organizations today want projects to be catalytic. What I mean by that is the outcome of phase 1 funds phase 2. Right? So we had a project at a very large oil and gas company that they were expecting to reduce or redeploy a certain amount of headcount out of phase 1. That if they didn't get that, there would be no funding for phase 2. So the stakes were high, but at the back end, this process, celebrating success, recognizing the team that has delivered that, showing how the people now don't have to do that work that they were doing that was not productive, not efficient. And here's the value, fund phase 2. Right? So there you have it, the 7 sins of ECM projects. All in one slide. So how does Alfresco do it? So we've invested in what we call the Alfresco implementation methodology, or AIM for short. AIM has been under construction for at least a year. More than that, I've been here a year. We're spearheading it from a consulting standpoint, but we have product development involved. We have the SE team. It's integrated with our pre-sales process. It's really important to us that what our sales and pre-sales team talk to you about in terms of your needs and wants and requirements translate to the project scope that we pull together from a consulting standpoint. We think of this in 3 different models. There's a process model or life cycle. There's a team model, so the people aspect. And then there's a control model, how you control the project and the team. Pretty simple. The process framework for ECM with Alfresco looks like this. So phase 1 is visioning. Think of visioning as starting with that current state assessment, future state definition, where am I now, where do I want to be, and a business case definition, lining up the business, the impacts and evidence, and quantifying those areas of opportunity. Phase 2 is roadmap. Roadmap is where you are defining the work, and it may not be a specific individual project. It may be a series of projects. Review, refine, and approve. That's your consensus building process. Everyone comes to agree on the roadmap. Most of the time, I see these roadmaps in one of 2 ways. One, it's either a kind of 6 to 9 month view, and it's got 1 or 2 projects within that. Or in some cases, it's an 18 to 24 month view, right? Which is more of a strategic roadmap. Here's where we want to get to. I have 7 different ECM systems. I want to get to 1. That's not going to happen overnight. I need to take steps over this 24-month period. Program definition is where you start to assemble all the team. Who's going to be involved? I need infrastructure folks. I need network folks. I need database admins. I need vendors. I need potentially system integrators. Kind of assessing the lay of the land. Project execution is its own section, and within project execution, we have 6 phases. Planning phase, obviously that's where we're formalizing around the project team and objectives. Analysis is where we're getting requirements down on paper. Design, obviously, is how technically do we solve those requirements. Build, test, transition is how do we move this to production, start getting value out of it. And it's a loop, right? Continuous feedback or continuous improvement loop. You might ask, and I will tell you 99% of our projects today leverage RAD or Agile methodology. And you may say that's a classic kind of software development waterfall approach. Yes, it is. But all the time we incorporate agile sprints into, a sprint around analysis, design, build, and test, or design and build once you have a base set of requirements. Within roadmap development, one of the things you'll see as a deliverable is a project charter. And the project charter is really the what needs to be accomplished, why it needs to be accomplished, who will be impacted by this. It's all that upfront stuff. We encourage you to have something like that, even a light version, so that you don't get into an agile sprint and have people going and developing and then changing things on the fly, and you're managing to a moving target, right? There isn't a guidepost of this is ultimately what we want to accomplish with this thing. And then on the back end, the value assessment, which is reviewing the solution, having a continuous improvement governance process, whether it's an ECM governance committee, steering committee, value state agreement, plan revisions, right? So you're going through and you're going to do periodic checkpoints. And we have some methodologies within Alfresco about how to measure metrics, what metrics to measure, and essentially assessing those as you go through. And making improvements, making changes, planning the next set of work around a new set of configuration to drive improvement to that. Project control model is, quite frankly, it's kind of basic project management aspects. How do you manage change when a user says, I didn't really want the requirement like that. I want it to actually be like this. How are you going to control that and govern that? A communications plan. Who needs to know what when you're looking at deploying this system? There might be a broad-based communication via email or a newsletter that all the users who are going to be impacted on Friday night or Monday morning when they come into the office because you flip the switch on Monday night. It could be a communications plan to IT. requesting support for this key project from all the other groups that are going to touch it, you know, the infrastructure team, the network team, et cetera. Deliverable management. What deliverables? Every IT company I've ever walked into has their own project delivery methodology, their own set of artifacts that need to be produced. Right? Here's what a requirement spec looks like. Here's what a proper design spec, security requirement, et cetera. How are you going to manage those and govern those? And what's the context around how suppliers and contractors and others that are involved that aren't within your walls interact with that? Knowledge plan. How do you enable the project team members? Right? Whether it's taking Alfresco training, or you send one of your people to Alfresco training, or hire a partner to come in and work with your team. How do you get that information out to the people that need to know it? Verification plan is quite simply testing. Right? We typically go through functional test, usually integration test, user acceptance testing, and in some cases performance and load testing. Those are kind of the 4 discrete validation points. We encourage our customers to test all dimensions, whether or not we're involved or not. And deployment plan is something a lot of people think about, you know, 2 weeks before go live. We encourage you to start thinking about it actually in the requirements phase, right? Because that definition of requirements is going to drive a lot of consideration around what is the sequence on which you're going to cut over. So that's the control model. The team model, within our methodology specific to Alfresco, it's really 2 things. The first is that kind of governance board, which is the sponsorship from us as a supplier to you, as a software vendor and your trusted partner on the ECM journey, plus your project sponsor. And we envision usually monthly checkpoints, right? Even if it's an informal meeting, but we like to connect and say, here's where we're at, here's risks and issues, here's what we need from you. Sometimes larger global deployments, it's a formal steering committee, and they might meet every 2 weeks. And you know, meeting minutes are captured, and action items are captured, and formal status reports are provided. And then the engagement team, what we're investing in is building out what is the team model for a Alfresco project, right? How much time do you need from a system admin or a network admin or a database admin? And what are the roles that need to be fulfilled within a typical Alfresco engagement? So that, you know, when you say, how long is it going to take for me typically to do this? What does the project look like? And who do I need to have involved? We can say, typically, this is what we see. Right? So with that, how am I doing on time? 7 minutes. I'll take questions, comments. We got one winner of the bottle of wine unless somebody else is going to jump in front of her here.
Steve, I have a question. I would assume that if you have to tackle taxonomy issues...
Let me, actually, sorry.
I assume that if you have to tackle taxonomy issues, that happens in the design phase?
Yes, from a detailed taxonomy standpoint, yes. We do run, typically we'll do in the requirements phase, we'll do something called content modeling workshops. And that's teaching you about the constructs of the software package and what things are possible, so that you can then say, well, here's how I think this needs to look. But in terms of the actual configuration of a taxonomy in Alfresco, that starts in design.
About what percentage of the work in the design phase would you say that comprises?
It varies, and it varies based on kind of the headless repository versus I'm using Share versus some other UI. Probably 30, 40% sounds right to me.
So fairly significant.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Sabina, do you have, Sabina, raise your hand, Sabina. So Sabina is the Director of Consulting for Alfresco in Europe, in EMEA. She'll actually be presenting this at Summit in London. Is that consistent with your experience, Sabina? Yeah. Question in the back.
Okay, if we are going to be working with a partner, when exactly do we also get support or input from that Alfresco team? Because right now, like we've just engaged with a partner, so we're not sure like when we also get to work with someone from Alfresco directly, or I guess we're
Okay.
unclear about that relationship.
Okay. So the answer to that question from my perspective is it depends, and it depends on a couple of things. How complex your project is, your use cases. Is it a new product that just came out from Alfresco, for instance? Alfresco Services is not, we're not in the services business to have this massive services arm, right? We're not in it for the revenue sake. We're in it to make sure our customers are very successful. And so the team that I have are not the cheapest resources out there for development. They're the experts in the field. 12, 15 years of ECM experience, 8 to 10 plus years of Alfresco experience. They're the architect level, right? They can make the technology do just about anything. And our strategy is we line up to the most significant, complex, first-of-a-kind implementations globally. Global deployment architectures where you're going to have multi-site, potentially active, inactive, replication requirements. Those types of configurations, we typically want to be involved, and usually during the sales process we will get involved so that we can make sure that, frankly, Alfresco's brand, it's our name on the software so that we can make sure that the project is successful. In your particular case, you're working with a partner. If you have concerns in particular areas, I would ask the partner about those areas. And we all the time provide feedback to and support to partners. We have something called Partner Expert Advisory that when they're proposing a solution and perhaps they've never done it before, or they've done one, but this one or a few, but this one has particular complexities to it, they can reach back to the Alfresco Services team and we will essentially feather in some review periods, right? We might do a requirements review, a design or code review, and some architectural work. The partner's doing all the development, the configuration, the testing, but we come in at key points and just make sure that, hey, this looks right. So that might be something worth considering. If the partner's done it many, many times and it feels extremely confident, and then you asking the question, hey, I'm a little bit concerned about this, they should be able to answer that question and alleviate your concern, right?
How is the Alfresco implementation different than a typical project implementation? So, what I heard is, which we use across any project.
Mm-hmm.
What is the differentiation for the Alfresco implementation?
What is the differentiation for the Alfresco implementation? So, so the differentiation from, in my opinion, doesn't come from the project implementation methodology. It comes from the software itself. The software, the feedback we have and the way we've engineered the software is, it is faster to install, it is easier to configure, it's easier to integrate, right? So those sprints you define are easier and faster to execute than most competitors out there, right? But the fact that you need to define requirements and understand how to fulfill those requirements doesn't change from a methodology standpoint. That's how I'd respond to it. I don't think the differentiation from Alfresco is in, because you're right, it could be not even an ECM methodology. It's an IT project methodology, right? I started 50% of IT projects fail outright, right? So, and go Google search and say IT project failure rates, and you will hit 850 results with a lot of this information in there around, just the kind of stats that I've been talking about. Does that answer your question?
Any special consideration that needs to be made for Alfresco?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of considerations, but one is around that content modeling, understanding what content you're dealing with, how you're going to be dealing with it. And we have structure in our methodology around facilitating those workshops. Second is Alfresco as a platform. If you guys have been working with it for a long time, you know that it's extremely powerful and extremely flexible. You can do a lot of things with it. That doesn't mean you should do a lot of things with it. So educating yourself on what the out-of-box capabilities are and staying aligned with the out-of-box, at least technique and construct, is really important, right? Because we see customers time and again say, I do things this way. I want a new modern architecture called Alfresco that's going to do it, but go make Alfresco look like what I spent 22 years making my competitive software. It happens all the time, right? Because change is hard, and everyone says, I don't want to change, right? So understanding whether it's you educating yourself or hiring an expert that can come in and help you map your requirements and gap that to the out-of-box software capabilities, really important. And then, and then integration, customization, all those things need to be done in such a way that they envision, that they contemplate an upgrade path. And there's best practices and approaches that allow you to do that. I think we are just about out of time. Good questions. So anybody that asked a question or made a story and wants to be in the running for the bottle of wine, stand up. I love it.
I don't drink, so it's all yours.
All right, Josh, you won it.
All right.
Thank you. On behalf of Alfresco, thank you for your commitment of time, not only to this session, but to the conference. It means a lot to us. You being here, obviously, this is an important topic to you. I hope you took some things away from this session. Happy to take any questions separately offline. But any help we can do to make sure you get the most out of your Alfresco investment, we're here to help, and we want you to get that value. And thank you for your trust and partnership with Alfresco. Have a great rest of the conference and a safe trip home.
Sin number 7 was overruled. IT celebration at the end of the project.
Exactly. Celebrate success.
Steve, it's a
Yeah.
pleasure to meet you
Hey,
in
Josh.
person.